Hey guys, it's time for my first review of the year. I'm really excited. I posted a video just before this one about how my channel is changing moving forward. Check that video out if you want to know what this channel is going to be about from here on out. And I'm really making a huge effort to be consistent on this channel this year. I talk a little bit more about that in the video that I posted previously, so check out my update video. So without further ado, let's get into this book review. So the last video I made in 2019 was an unboxing of my first Book of the Month book, which I finally finished this first week of January, which was The Water Dancer by Ta-Nahisi Coates. And I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. I looked it up and hopefully they were right too. So this was my first Book of the Month book that I ever received. I have since gotten 3 more, haven't read any of them. Really didn't have any expectations for this book. I've heard a lot about it, and it was really cute. I took this book when I first got it to a coffee shop to sit down and start reading it, and this sweet old lady named Ivy started talking to me about the author because she had heard about him, and he lives in New York City, and he was doing a reading / speaking, I think, on his writing in the Bronx, I want to say. Because I had never read him before, he really wasn't on my radar for speakers to go see, so no, I didn't make a plan to go see it. I did not see it, but I really wish I had now, because after reading this book, I would love to meet the brain behind it. I really enjoyed this book. I wasn't sure if this was going to be up my alley because it didn't seem like a book I would normally pick up on my own, which is why I love Book of the Month. It was the whole goal of signing up for Book of the Month was to read books that maybe I wouldn't pick up myself in a bookstore or wouldn't prioritize, because definitely this sounded interesting, but it wasn't high on my priorities list. I chose this one because it seemed the most interesting out of the 5 books that I had options for. Really quick summary of what the book is about from my own perspectives. Essentially, it's about this character Hiram, who is a slave in Virginia, and his mother was a slave, and his father was a white man who is also his master. His mother disappears when he's very young, and he doesn't have any memory of how his mother disappeared, which is very strange for Hiram because he has this ability. He has photographic memory, and he can remember everything that anyone tells him. It's kind of a party trick he performs for white people when they come to his father's estate, and his father wants to entertain his guests. Something happens early on in the book to change his circumstances just a little bit and complicates his life. He also falls in love with a slave in Virginia, and the woman he falls in love with gives him the spark of the idea of freedom, which is something he never really thought of for himself. Through all the events that unfold after the first major event that happens in this book, he finds himself working for the Underground, which in this book I think represents the Underground Railroad. I don't know if it was referred to as the Underground or if it was always referred to as the Underground Railroad in real life, but in the book it is just referred to the Underground. Basically a network of people who do their best to free slaves. And from there the story unfolds about Hiram and his relationship with his past, his relationship with his freedom, and his relationship with the people in his life. That's just a really quick synopsis. On Goodreads, I'm going to be giving this book a 5 stars because honestly everything about it totally I fell in love with. I didn't fall in love with it right away. I think it took me until the first big event of the book to actually get into the book, and then as soon as I think it was a little more than halfway through, I couldn't put it down. It was so good. It's all I wanted to do. When I had to put it down, I was just thinking about wanting to get back to reading this book. I think what makes this book really good is that the stakes are really high and you can feel them, you sense it, you feel the anxiety and the fear that goes into everything that this main character is pursuing and doing. The main character is super engaging. The character growth is something that I have been craving from a book for a very long time, because I feel like character development is something that has been forgotten about in a lot of writing. Not that that makes a book bad, but just saying that it's something that I value a lot because character growth is something that's important in my personal life. What I really liked about this book is it kind of made me more aware of my privilege as somebody who is not a person of color, because there's a lot of things in this book, because I knew I think it's classified as surrealist, but there are a lot of things in this book where I couldn't tell you if it was real or not based off of the history of slavery. In school, the only time we ever studied slavery was in high school, and it wasn't something that we spent a whole lot of time on, and I'm actually retroactively very angry about that. I think I studied the Holocaust for a straight year in middle school, so and that's important to my culture because my family, half my family is Jewish. When it comes to the injustices of my country, the country I live in, the country I was born and raised in, I really feel like it's something I should be more aware of, and by the end of high school should be more educated on, because while I have seen in the lives of my friends how there is still racism and that the culture from slavery is still affecting us today, people of color, for the worse, and the fact that white supremacy is becoming a really big problem in the country again. Well, it always has been, and now it's just coming to light and it's becoming worse. What this book did for me was made me realize how much I didn't know about slavery, because I couldn't tell you what parts of this were fiction and what parts of it were true to the history of our country, which was really unnerving for me. It made me very uncomfortable reading this book, but I think that was a really, really good thing and an important thing. What I'm looking into right now is renting books from the library on slavery in the United States, just a history. I'd really like to read more books about people who actually had firsthand accounts of what it was like to be a slave in the United States. So I'm looking for books on slavery in the United States, and really anything that you think is super important. If you have a book to recommend, I would super appreciate that down in the comments. I've done a little bit of my own research, but I'm not gonna make a huge list of all the books that I'm looking into. I found a few documentaries online as well, so I'm hoping to compare and contrast all the facts and everything. I feel like the United States education system is a little bit biased, not a little bit, hugely biased to make the United States look a little less horrible for what it did to the African American people and culture. So just on a personal level, that's why this book was super important to me and why it affected me so deeply, because it made me really uncomfortable in my privilege, and I think that's important. I think that's a good thing, and I think that that is something that this book could bring to many people if you're paying attention to the things you don't know about in this book. It is fiction. There is magical realism. It definitely brought to light a lot of the very intense emotion and insane life decisions that slaves in the United States had to make in order to obtain their freedom. From leaving your family behind to what are you willing to give your life to free your family kind of questions, you know? From slaves trying to buy their own freedom by saving money and having that money stolen from them. These are things as a person of privilege that I never thought of or considered. The Holocaust hit me really deep and very close to my heart because it's something that I'm personally connected to because of my family. It is my responsibility as a United States citizen to understand the turmoil of the Civil War and slavery. It's part of my culture. And while I don't suffer the negative consequences of how that impacted my culture, it's still there. It's part of everyday life for some people in this country, so we're a very big part of the country. I always talk about a book in three aspects. The writing. The writing is so good. What I love about the writing is that I think there are some writers who feel like they need to spell out everything for the reader, and I really appreciate writers like Coates who put a lot of faith that the reader is intelligent. Because it is told in first person, he talks about things and writes about things that Hiram would know about and not give them explanation if Hiram knows what that is. So it turned out for me to be something where I would end up looking up a lot of things, which I think as a reader is something that makes books really fun and engaging, is when you read about something you actually have to be like, oh, what is that? I don't know what that means. Kind of like a vocabulary builder, except for this is more like a culture / intelligence builder. Coates writes with the assumption that his readers are intelligent, that they are curious people, and that they will find out what these things mean, because he doesn't explain every little thing. And I don't think that is the job of an author. I think that's the job of a reader, to be honest, because if you're a reader, you're probably a curious person, and if you're a curious person, you're gonna go find that information, that knowledge that is gonna enhance the reading of your book. So the writing is one aspect. The other aspect is the characters. Character development is amazing in this book. We follow Hiram throughout the entire book, but not only do we see character develop in Hiram, we see it in the people around him, and I think that is such intelligent writing and very real. The people in this book were very real to me. They seemed like rounded, deep, thoughtful characters, profound actual beings that could have existed in this world, probably did. Some of them were based on real people, and I just think that that was absolutely brilliant. The characters, I fell in love with them or I hated them, and I think that is the mark of a good writer. And then the last aspect I always consider in a book is the story, and the story did not catch me until the first major event in the book, but that's okay because every book needs to give, you know, a little bit of an information dump or to set up the scene and you really need to get a sense of where a character is at in the beginning of the book to really appreciate where they end up at the end of the book. But where Hiram is in the beginning of the book is kind of a little bit of an aimless kind of blah figure, and that's the whole point of the main, like the beginning part of the book, I think. He isn't putting too much thought into his own destiny, really. He has this one idea of what his life would be / should be based off of the kind of person he thinks he is in society, while having everyone around him telling him that he had this really well-known and respected mother that he can't even remember because she disappeared when he was so young, and not really even looking into the mystery of what happened to her, like kind of just accepting that she was gone. And that's part of slave life, is that your parents sometimes get sold off before you ever really get to know them. The book is broken up into 3 sections, I think it was 3. I want to say it was 3. Each section had a lot to offer. I particularly liked the end. I think the ending was absolutely beautiful, brilliant, had me like tearing up with just a heartwarming feeling. If you want a really good heartwarming ending, it's a little open-ended, but kind of in a good way. So it doesn't really close the book on the story necessarily. Like, you get the sense that the story continues afterwards, but the important parts of the story are told. The whole book, I wasn't 100% sure whether or not there was a form of magical realism in it. There is, which is not something I expected, nor is it something that anyone told me was part of this book, which is not a bad thing, and I hope that I'm not spoiling it too bad for people. Once we got to the point where we've acknowledged, yes, 100%, there is a certain type of magic involved in this book, I just was transported from a historical fiction book to a like historical fantasy fiction book, and it was a really fun transition, and I think he did it really well, and it was really enjoyable. It wasn't too much, it was just enough. It wasn't the magic, though fun and part of the story, was not the main focus of the story. So I really appreciated that. Sometimes I feel like fantasy books focused a little too much on the magic, and I wouldn't mind that if it didn't come at the sacrifice of character development or plot, but a lot of the times the magic ends up being the plot, and I don't think that makes for a very engaging story, but that's just my opinion. So I think he did it brilliantly. I think he did it perfectly. Loved the beginning, middle, and end, and I just loved the book more as I read it. So I think that's just how reading should be. You should just fall in love with the book more and more as you keep going. So that's all I have for the spoiler-free part of this review. I'm going to now transition into the spoilery part of the review. So if you have not read the book, go no further. Go read the book, come back to this time code, and we will discuss further. Spoiler warning going into effect now. Okay, I'm gonna try not to make this part of the review too long. So according to my notes, I really started to enjoy the story at about 174. So if you read this book and you're a reader like me and you've gotten to like page 100 and you're kind of like, I don't know if this book is gonna be for me, because while I didn't not enjoy the story, I also wasn't super jazzed about it. I liked the questions it brought up in me, but I wasn't enjoying the story necessarily. Page 174 is where it really picked up for me, and then from then on it was just a snowball effect of me enjoying the book. I think on 174, according to my notes, was around when Georgie betrayed Hiram and Sophia. While Maynard's death was something that caught my attention and engaged me into the book more, because there was this mystery of how Hiram ended up into this other place, and it was talking a little bit about his gift and what that might be and what it might mean. Those questions were interesting to me, but I think Georgie's betrayal put the emotion into the book that I really needed to catch not just the attention of my brain, but the attention of my heart, and pull at my heartstrings a little bit, because that betrayal, I felt it. One thing I really enjoyed about the book is that it gave enough time for every section of the book. So when Hiram ends up in the north in Philadelphia, they give him a year in Philadelphia to become a new person, or to, I don't know, I hate that phrasing. I really don't like it when people say, oh, I'm a whole new person, because I feel like that takes away from all the work you put into yourself, because you're not a whole new person, you're a more whole person is the way that I look at it. And I think that's what happened to Hiram. Yes, he changed, and I think in the ways that he changed, he did become a more whole person, transitioned from kind of the fantasy of adolescence into the reality of being an adult. His perspective on life and freedom, and what it means and how it relates, if it means anything at all, if the people that you love are not free as well. I feel like that was given the exact appropriate amount of time. all of the transitioning, kind of like the trials that he had to go through to become part of the underground, to become somebody worthy of the underground, somebody who can actually understand the sacrifice and the work and the turmoil that goes into trying to free other slaves. And then this kind of pressure that he was feeling the entire time to understand what conduction meant, and what it really was, without anybody telling him, until Harriet or Moses actually shows him what it is exactly, which, by the way, completely caught me off guard. Other than the synopsis, I didn't look into this book at all, and the synopsis is a little ambiguous as to whether or not it does contain magical realism. They talk about this power he has, but I was like, oh, is it like the power of will, or the power of like fortitude, you know, or something like that, or is it an actual like magic power, you know, like light coming from my hands type thing. Turns out we got some magical realism. We got teleportation as a thing in the book. I really like the way that Coates did the teleportation. I love that the teleportation is kind of this dance you do with the elements and potentially like some form of goddess of water. I like that you need elements in order to do the transportation. Like, it's not just something you're able to do because of memory. I love that memory is the bridge to get you from one place to the other, and that the longer that you've had the memory and the deeper the memory is, the further it can take you. I feel like that is so symbolic of the work we can do individually, taking our past and understanding how it affects our present and using that to change our future, because that's essentially all I did last year in therapy. But then I also love the symbolism of, if we need to remember the history of our own country, of the United States of America, and the connection it has to slavery, in order to see how it's affecting our present and move forward and do better, that the more we remember what happened to our history, whether or not it was painful, just like Hiram and his painful memory of his mother. It is painful to realize that this country that you do or do not love, this country you're so part of, this country that is founded on this ideal of freedom, did not give freedom to all. We did not do justice to all. We still have not done justice to all. There's a huge topic in politics right now about whether or not the country owes reprimands to people of color, kind of the way that Germany did for Jewish people in their country. And if you're not aware of all of that, something to look up, because I'm not going to explain everything in this video. Also, because I don't have a full understanding of how it works. I just read articles online and listen to NPR, and that's all I've heard about it, really. So I won't pretend like I'm an expert, but I know that that's a hot topic right now, of whether or not that would make anything better, if it's too little too late, if it's something that is going to negatively affect our country for whatever reason. I'm of the opinion that it's the least we can do. Whether or not it makes the country better, at least it would make the lives better of people who are mistreated in this country. I live in New York City. The most impoverished communities in the city are those of African Americans and Latinos, and that's just so obvious and apparent, and it's been true all these years. Sorry, my battery died, had to put in a new one, so the frame might be a little bit different. It's a hot topic right now, and so what I really like about the book is that it brings up the hot topics of today without fully addressing them. But if you are putting in the effort and the curiosity into this book that I think that it deserved, that it should spark in the reader, what I think it was trying to spark in the reader was this curiosity of like, well, how have we used our history, our painful history, the way Hiram does, to transport people of color into a better situation, because I think that's really the big topic of the book, if I'm honest. I mean, I haven't looked too much into what Ta-Nahisi Coates' goal with this book was yet, because I didn't want it to influence this review yet. I'm gonna try to make more videos on authors, not just books, so I want to read his other books as well. But that's how I feel, that's how I interpreted the book on my own without any additional outside help. I really like the displacement of Hiram's culture in losing his mother, because he talks about her doing the water dancing with the jug on her head, and how it was a big part of their culture before they were removed from Africa to be slaves in the United States. And I love that there was that story about the king and on the boat in the uprising, and all the people and all the slaves on the boat going into the water and being guided back home. I love that there was like this disconnect for Hiram in the beginning of the book from his culture. He was so focused on trying to be part of his white father's culture. This idea that somehow he would be like the one to inherit his father's estate or his business, something, or that he would be able to help with the business. He was really removed from his African American roots in that sense, and really didn't seem to be trying to hold on to them. Just thought of his mother and her legend and her culture as this thing that was lost to him, and oh well, I just gotta move on with my life. But as soon as he started tapping into his culture, as soon as he started remembering his history, no matter how painful it was, he was able to not only do a lot of good for himself and become a stronger person, but do good for the people around him. And I think that was amazing. Loved it. Loved all of it. The symbolism, the metaphors, the emotion, the tragedy. Just like I loved this book. It was so good. I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. I really wasn't. Like, I heard that it got really great reviews. I've heard that it's won awards, and I kind of don't really like a lot of the books that win awards. Little Fires Everywhere, good example of a book that like didn't really enjoy, that got a lot of hype. So I was a little prepared to be disappointed about this book, but I wasn't at all. 5 stars from me for sure. This book has an insane amount of incredible quotes. One of my first favorite quotes from the book was on page 35, and it was, "Sloth was literal death for us, while for them it was the whole ambition of their lives." That hit me very hard because not only was there deep truth in it, but I still think this is true today. But I feel like ultimately what I think the quote is saying, and what I think is still true today, is that the whole ambition of our lives is to make our lives easier. Our everyday lives, whether it's, ordering your groceries delivered to your home versus going out to get them, so that way you have more time to do things in the house. Then you also have to think about the fact that you're making your life easier at the cost of making somebody else's life harder. So example being Prime now. Yes, I use it sometimes. In the city, it can be really hard to find a grocery store near your apartment sometimes. So especially a grocery store that carries the things that you're looking for. So whenever you use Prime to order to your home, it's easier for you because you don't have to go outside in the snow, and you don't have to, go searching for those things and spend the time looking throughout the grocery store for all the things that you need to shop for. But somebody else does, and somebody does have to go, bringing your groceries via car or sometimes a bicycle with a cart. And somebody else does need to go through that. So you're making your life easier at the cost of making somebody else's life harder. There are some arguments to say, there are people who need these jobs even though they don't pay well, etc. But I don't like to try to use that as an excuse to be lazy. So that quote just resonated with me by making the picture of slavery exactly what I think it should be, but also applying it to modern day life and how really things have not changed. The upper class, the upper middle class, they try to make their lives easier by using these apps, by ordering their food, by ordering from Amazon, while Amazon workers are underpaid, overworked, literally passing out, dying, getting injured from the pressure that they're under from Amazon to live up to these really unrealistic expectations. I worked for Amazon, and I can tell you, it was the worst work experience I've ever had. And I think it's still true today. And so you gotta ask yourself, even though we're paying these people, really is it not any different than slavery? I mean, we really should be paying people a living wage to do the things we don't want to do. They're doing us the greatest favor of all, freeing up our time so we can do things that we want to be doing, and usually leisure things. The 2 hours I didn't have to spend grocery shopping today, I spent playing video games, So I think that person deserves to be paid a living wage, which honestly this day and age is probably between $20 and $25 an hour, which I think is probably way off. I don't know the actual statistics, but that's what it feels like. Because even at my highest paying retail job, where I was being paid almost $25 an hour, I still wasn't making enough to move into my own apartment. I had to get roommates, and that does not make for a whole adulthood. It does not make for a whole life. It does not afford you the privacy or the room to fully explore who you are as a person, because you're always dealing with these other things. So I really feel like that quote resonated with me on so many levels, on a historic level, but as well as a modern day level. I could talk about the quotes that I love forever, but I think what I'll do instead is leave some of them down in the description. And I will definitely post them to my Goodreads. I'm gonna go through the process of adding all of them to Goodreads right now, because I just think if the synopsis and the cover of the book and the appeal of the writer does not get you to read this book, I feel like if you read some of the quotes from this book, that's all the convincing you'll need. I actually think I'm gonna end the review there because I'm running out of battery, but also I feel like this is long enough. For those of you who have read this book, which I think if you're at the end of this video, you probably have, I'm curious to know how you found out about this book, how you found out about the author, what questions it arose for you about slavery in the United States and what that was like. Did you look anything up? Did it spark your curiosity? Did you learn a little bit more about slavery than you knew before? And then just generally your feelings about the book. What were some of your favorite quotes? Please comment it all down below, because my whole goal with this channel is to create community. I want to hear from you. I will reply to you. I don't get notifications from this channel about comments. I don't know why. I haven't been able to figure it out. I haven't been able to figure it out with YouTube. In contacting their help desk. So, but I will be just like constantly refreshing the comments on this video. So just let me know in the comments. I really want to talk to you about this book. Just definitely stick around. Until next time, I will see you later.